The School for Good and Evil 2, cast, story, and everything we know about a potential sequel. While Disney has proven that almost everybody has a soft spot for fairy tales, the 2022 Netflix movie The School for Good and Evil takes a look at the classic stories of princes, princesses, and evil queens from an entirely new perspective. Based on the young adult novels by Soman Chainani, the film centers on best friends Agatha and Sophie, who are from a small village where nothing magical ever happens. When they discover a magical book, they are swept away to the School for Good and Evil, where heroes and villains from fairy tales are real figures of history. Much to their surprise, Sophie is placed in the School for Evil, and Agatha is assigned to the School for Good. With 8 books in the School for Good and Evil series, there's a lot of potential for a continuing film franchise. It's been 2 years since the first movie premiered on Netflix, and fairy tale lovers are eager for news about the School for Good and Evil 2. Though there isn't a lot of info about the sequel yet, there are still some things that fans can probably expect. The School for Good and Evil 2 recent news. As of January 2024, there has no recent update about the School for Good and Evil 2. There is still hope, however. School for Good and Evil director Paul Feig and Soman Chainani have both voiced intentions of making more films based on the original novels. In 2022, shortly after The School for Good and Evil's release, Feig told Entertainment Weekly, "The goal is definitely for this to be a franchise." Chainani made a similar statement to Variety, saying, "We could make all 6 movies, so it just depends on how it does ultimately." The School for Good and Evil 2 is not confirmed. To date, The School for Good and Evil 2 has not yet officially been confirmed. However, despite a poor Rotten Tomatoes score of 38%, the viewership for the first film was high enough to entertain the possibility of a sequel. The movie made it to the #1 spot on Netflix's top 10 most viewed films the day after it premiered in September 2022, and continued to stay in the top 10 for the next 4 weeks, earning over 1 billion viewing minutes, via Deadline. It wouldn't be the first time that Netflix bypassed poor reviews to bring back a franchise that audiences loved. Movies like The Kissing Booth, which failed to impress critics, still gained a high enough following for the streaming service to make 2 more sequels. There's also the original Netflix series Emily in Paris, which, despite middling reviews, has seen high viewership numbers even into its 4th season. So it's not entirely out of the realm of possibility that fans could see the return of The School for Good and Evil 2 on Netflix. The School for Good and Evil 2, presumptive cast. In the event that The School for Good and Evil 2 is confirmed officially, there's a high likelihood that the movie will see the return of the main cast from the first film. Almost certainly, the sequel will star Sophia Weil as Agatha and Sophia Ann Caruso as Sophia, the protagonists. Other cast members that will likely return are Jamie Flatters, who played Prince Tedros in the first film, and Cate Blanchett as the voice of the Storian. The large supporting cast from The School for Good and Evil would also possibly return, including Michelle Yeoh as Professor Emma Anemone, Peter Serafinowicz as Yuba, and Rob Delaney as Stefan. Other possible cast members from the first film who could reprise their roles are Olivia Boothford, Earl Cave, Emma Law, Rosie Graham, Freya Parks, Joel, Chinini Ezeudu, and Bryony Scarlett. 2 important characters from the first movie were Professor Clarissa Dovey and Lady Lesso, played by Kerry Washington and Charlize Theron, respectively. While these characters are not featured in the second book of the School for Good and Evil series, there is still a possibility that the movie will bring them back into the fold, considering their star power. The School for Good and Evil 2, story. With the first film closely following the novel it's based on, it's likely that the plot of The School for Good and Evil 2 will be adapted from the second book of the series, A World Without Princes. At the end of The School for Good and Evil movie, Sophie and Agatha have returned home safely when an arrow appears out of a magic portal, and Agatha hears Tedra's voice calling out to her for help. This is where the plot for A World Without Princes begins, as Agatha and Sophie return to the School for Good and Evil. Upon their arrival, the friends discover that the school has undergone drastic changes. The School for Good has become the School for Girls, and the School for Evil is the School for Boys, which means that all princes are now considered evil. With this new discovery, Sophie and Agatha decide to set things right. Disguising herself as a boy named Philip,